good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are. And welcome to the first roundtable of the season. We are going to be talking to a whole group of people about what it is like to be in the realm of the outside of the box. So without further ado, I'm going to just get everybody who is outside of the waiting room into the house. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this roundtable discussion, the first of many, where we are discussing thinking outside of the box, acting outside of the box, and all of the things that we might do, have been forced to do, have had success doing with outside of the box thinking and acting in life, in theory. So without further ado, I am going to start this discussion with our panel of experts and, dare I say, misfits. I don't mean that in anything but the kindest way.
Far too generous.
I'd like to introduce us all. If you have been following along the whole with this whole series, then you have seen each of these people before, but let's go around and introduce ourselves, and like just a one-liner about what you do in this non-linear and outside of the box world. Let's start with Daniel.
Hey, thank you, Lydia. I'm grateful to be here. So my name is Daniel Knight, and everything that I do is focused on creating a world of more unity, abundance, and joy. And I do that through my community and my company called Unicorn Universe. And that's what I'm all about. So thank you.
Matt.
Lydia, hi everyone. My name is Matt Allen. I am founder of Kudos International. What do I do? We're going to change everything so that then it benefits us all, not just the people at the top.
All right. And Allison.
I'm Allison Jeffries. I'm a life recreation coach for women, and I help the women that I work with remember who they were born to be, heal their hearts, and let go of the judgment of others.
Michaela.
Beautifully pronounced, thank you. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and I also use human design. So I add the science and the less science together to create a very nice flow from one to the other. The science with human design is you get to test it. So that's it's fine by me. And I work with diverse people. It depends on what they need, but it's basically behavior change. What are you doing that you don't want to do and you want to do something different in order to reach your goals? I can work with that. And I work a lot with parents, parenting outside the box, doing something that you did not have done to you, but also done from looking forward, not looking back at what you didn't like, but looking forward at what you would like to be. What would you like to bring? So that's what I do.
Thank you. Mark.
Hi, everyone. I'm a misfit and very, very proud of it. Network of the Year, endorsed by Meta, who own WhatsApp. I operate 500 WhatsApp groups, and I've recently launched something called virtualpowernetworking.com, where some of the world's leading thought leaders and entrepreneurs meet I call it the epicenter of omni-channel hybrid virtual networking, where virtual and reality converge seamlessly. How out of the box do you want to get?
Simona.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Simona. I'm a writer, and I use my creativity and my writing to make a positive change in the world, to bring more love and healing and kindness to people all over. Yeah, that's me.
Anshar.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anshar Seraphim. I teach applied behavioral psychology and cognitive neuroscience for like business and sales and personal development. Kind of an interesting story just because I started just like 75% nonverbal with autism at age 11. And so I actually had to learn the communication skills that I teach to others to be able to talk to people. So kind of a fun way of having to learn something the hardest way possible. I work with everything from solopreneurs and individuals to large corporations. I even designed the behavioral interaction systems over at the legal brothels in Nevada. So definitely out of the box.
I think that is everyone except me. And I like to look at people as box people and talk about the lack of boxes, the boxant that we want to get past. If I hadn't by necessity gotten rid of some boxes in my life, I wouldn't be here. So I'm a lifelong performer and a healer at this point in my life, also change agent and instigator. And here I am on the Joyful Path and the Tuesday telecast, bringing this group of people together. So what we want to do right now is rapid fire. What is something that has brought you a change because you did something outside of the box when everybody else was stuck in the box?
I'm talking here from India. I survive on the benefit system in the UK. And despite the fact of limitations of money, opportunity, and credibility, I have friends all over the world who want to help support and engage and tell other people about the miracles that I'm going to make happen.
And what would have happened if you had stuck in a linear mode of thinking? You did what you were told.
I would have no idea because I've never been done what I've been told to do. And certainly live well beyond the limitations of what I'm told I cannot do, which is the more interesting question. I don't think that if we obey the guidance and stick within the outline of the box, we live life to its full potential. And I very much enjoy living life as freely and capably as I'm capable of doing. I think if people think linearly, that's no bad thing. People think in different ways, and just because I think differently, or we think differently, or anybody thinks differently, that doesn't make them different. That makes them unique, except we are all unique. And that's the beauty of the box. Whether we are inside the box or outside the box, we're still people. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, go ahead.
I walked away from a very successful corporate life because I realized at one point that I was living my life as two totally separate people. The one that was at work and the one that was at home, and decided to stop, figure out what my heart wanted me to do, publish a book, and start helping women. I feel like I help heal the world one woman at a time because women are exponential. And it was just changing that whole paradigm of what success looked like to me, of what living looked like to me, of what being myself looked like to me. And my goal is to help others find that, whatever it is that is them, and live it.
Which is in a box, the heart or the mind, Alice?
Oh, the mind. The mind. This is who we are. This is where we live. And this is not always ours. So we're living as if we're robots, and it's done. That time is over. It's time for each of us to embrace who we are here and live our lives as to what makes us happy and what works for us in connection with everybody else in the world, not in despite of, and not in competition with, but together.
I'd like to jump in with a human design thing on the end of that, because according to human design, the head is the observatory of life, you know, the universe and everything. So you are gathering information, storing information, making it mean things. You're doing all this stuff with the head, but your body is where you make your decision. And depending on your particular human design as to what that's like. But the head is not a reliable source of decision making because it's full of stuff that you've gotten from outside. And again, depending on your design, you keep more things or you let things go. But you know, you can't believe everything you think. So going with your gut feeling, for example, is legit. And some people will have a stronger intuition than others, but everybody has one. The question is, how squashed is yours? So, you know, human design helps you to figure out where you are, box or otherwise. But living in your head is definitely not the most productive place to be. And you can end up spinning because you're just full of stuff from outside. And it depends, what's your environment? What stuff are you letting in? You know, I haven't watched the news ever anywhere since I think 2016, and you know, I'll find things out days after they've happened and it's like, oh wow, damn, glad I missed that, you know. I'm perfectly happy not knowing, because if I can't deal with it, then you know, if I can't address it, then why do I need to stress over it? So you know, I'm careful about what I let into my head.
I've learned that the language that we use matters, you know, not just with other people, but also with ourselves. In the process of having to compensate for a lot of symptoms of autism, I had a really long time period where I went about things completely the wrong way. And that was everything from masking, trying to fit in with everyone, to almost apologizing all the time for my symptoms. And I learned that positive framework doesn't just help other people understand who you are, it helps you accept who you are. So language matters. And I think the thing that really occurred to me in like full stride when I was going through that process, because it was a process wrought with a lot of failure, I was focused so much on trying to be more like other people and understand them and connect to them because they were all mysterious aliens to me. But in that journey of understanding the brain to get there, I learned how so much of what we consider as truth has absolutely nothing to do with truth. And it's interesting that we all walk around in these biomechanical bodies, you know, with the idea that we're still in a room standing when we're hurtling through the universe at unknown speeds, that we have this consistent framework of time, but that if I was riding on the back of a photon, I could travel 12 light years in an instant and then look over my shoulder and see 12 years into the past when I look at where I came from. There's so much that we don't incorporate into this vision of truth that we have as individuals. And I think part of the process is learning to filter out some of the evolutionary systems that can sabotage the truth of cognition. And so I felt like to get to truth, I had to move away from it at first, which was interesting.
the box is something that is placed on us, is what I see, whether it's placed on us by ourselves or it's placed on us by the outside. And to break out of that in order to see something else, or to find that we have broken out of that because we don't fit at all, and we break a mold in order to create pathways to that which is around us, is where we break down the barriers, the walls of that box. And it may be in order to see that universe beyond us. We want to open that place, and it's just about curiosity. And I think that humans don't we get afraid of that curiosity. And I think that what I like about what everybody's saying here is everybody here has that curiosity and that intrinsic need to break down those walls. What Anshar is saying, at least in my existence, where sometimes I will see those places where, okay, there's say, for example, the fourth dimension. Now I can't see it because this is too much information for what's going on while I'm trying to deal with my social situation. And so we will cut out things. And I think that we have that going on in the educational system, where we say, I can't handle that extra information, so I'm going to put this information back into the box and just put the barriers back on, so that we can handle it, so that it's acceptable in the social structure which we have, and not get curious about it, so that we can stay safe. Can you think of a time when you have found that either you have been put in a situation where something has been kept from you in order to keep you safe, or been kept from a child, a member of your family, in order to keep you safe? And you either did this for yourself, or you pushed against it because that was not your wish.
I was raised by a 6'5" military officer for a father, in the height of all kinds of craziness going on out there in the world, as it's been since whenever. And he shielded us as children from everything, from the Vietnam War, from the POWs, from the internal political conflict, all of those things. And so I grew up with a different worldview than most. And my measure of safety, having grown up in Scotland, is much higher than most people's. So I don't go around with that fear that most people exhibit, based on the conditioning that we've had as we've grown up. And I now understand that I was in a box and that things do happen, but I'm grateful for the fact that I don't have that overactive fear mechanism looking for the next peril out there.
Even when I was a child, I've always had that curiosity, but I loved asking questions, right? And I always wanted to explore so much around me. And I remember, like, my environment didn't really encourage that, whether that was in school or from my parents, or like when I wanted to go on and be a dancer, for example, like little stuff like that, or just like, yeah, you're asking too many questions. So for many years, I shut that part down, like in my teenage years, and for a lot of like many years, I just didn't want to sound stupid. I was like, oh, I'll just leave it. And I found my way back, like in my late 20s, I think. Like, it was very much later. And I started playing with that again and exploring again and asking questions. And I don't really know how, like, I found it again, or it was always there. I just, it found me, kind of, we found each other. But I'm really glad I did, because it takes me into all these different directions and areas and explorations, that are super, super interesting, you know, like knowledge, people, places. So yeah.
Sometimes it's very difficult to ignore the truth, even though we get told what we should believe, and some might say manipulated. Now, for me, the question has always been, what is the truth? And not just for me, but for everybody. I think sometimes the powers that be have this aspiration to do things for our good. And sometimes that ends up as being overbearing or even censoring the things that we should have the free right to ownership of and agency over. I think it's personally my life's mission to make sure that everybody benefits from the truth, and from the truth that is that we are all people, and we all have, to the large degree, not every one of us, but to the large degree, the best hope and aspiration for everybody else. There's been a question that I ask a lot of people, is what they believe in and where they stand and what they think is the truth out of what we're told currently. And for me, my experience from asking lots of people is that it's not quite what we're told. And if the risk is what we're told is for our safety or our peace of mind or our good well-being, rather live a little bit more dangerously, rather live a little bit outside the box, but with the truth. I don't know. Some people, I guess, quite happy living within the realms of the expectations that those things that are set out to protect us do actually protect us. Others of us, potentially some of us in this room, like to ask questions and discern for ourselves what the truth is. I like the second option.
Yeah, I'm curious about what we'd be protected from. I don't think I don't have that optimistic view. I don't think they're trying to protect us from anything. They being the people who have the power to decide a great many things about life, the universe, and what happens to us. People start off, I think, with generally good intentions. I'm talking, you know, babies start off with good intentions, and then they learn things, and they learn from other people's limitations. So this is why I do the parenting outside the box, because parents will respond from fear for their child and try and keep them contained and, you know, fit in over here so that you don't cause trouble or you don't, you know, get in the way of something. And those limitations we take on as kids, you can't help it. That's how human beings are designed. It's all about you as a child, because that's survival. So you take on these limitations, and that box that you live within is the one that you have accepted as a child and you don't recognize as an adult because it's always been there. So for the people who do recognize it, it can be a tough journey. You know, it can take a while to figure out, damn, I'm in somebody else's box, you know, and then you have to break out of it and figure out, what am I going to do from here? And how does that work? And people don't like it when you do things differently. They get very upset because you're not behaving in a predictable manner. So what are they going to do with you now? And so they try and squash you a little bit more. And I mean, if you do, if you go into the academic realm, for example, and you do studies here, I've done a bunch of them because I like learning, right? But what I noticed was every time I would get a degree or a certificate, wherever I got that from, they say, okay, forget everything else. This is what you do now. And then I'd do the next thing, forget everything else. This is what you do now. It's like, how many boxes can we be in? They're not doing it for my benefit. They're trying to maintain their hold on that particular little group. I mean, if you look at applied behavior analysis, it has its own language. Why? It's not for anybody's protection other than to keep that little group separate. So you have to come and ask, right? And we sound like we know something that other people don't know. Well, Yeah, but if I translate into English, now you know too. So I don't know. These boxes, are they for us? Nah, I don't think so.
You said that they don't protect anybody. The people that those things protect are the people who decide what those rules are. And you also said that generally people don't like the different way of things being done. I'd very much argue against that. People very much love what I do. It's very different.
That's a particular group of people, perhaps, because generally speaking, if you're a teacher in a classroom and you've got a bunch of kids doing different things and they're not following how you anticipate them going, I give you 10 minutes before you start losing it, because you can't contain that, right? So on an
Sure.
individual to individual basis, maybe, but you start bucking the trend and going in a different direction, and there will be people that don't like that. The ones who liked you in the box won't like it when you're not in the box. That's a fairly, I don't know, it's been my experience. It might not be yours, in which case, great. But that's certainly what I've learned.
So let's take
You
this
said generally in a very specific situation, which is teaching a class. That can't be general. That's very specific. I talk to people again from all over the world, from all different walks of life, from all different ages. And my experience is that people generally, especially now maybe, are looking for change. And
Okay.
if we can deliver that change, that's what people, in my experience, and possibly limited, like you say,
The
is what
classroom
people
was an
generally want.
example rather than, it was an example of a location and a situation that we could all relate to, everybody having been in one, rather than that's specifically what I'm talking about. It's just an example.
I'm offering here that if you were to change that behavior and it was to become unpredictable, irrational from what your following were to expect, then they would not perhaps be so excited about what you were doing, I think, is what Michaela is sort of getting at. What is the nature of these boxes that we are making, going off of what Michaela is saying? Like, so we're little and we come into the world and we have all the intention of having love and getting fed and following people around us. And everybody supposedly wants to keep us safe. There's the idea of bosses, right? Bosses don't work. Probably everybody here agrees with that. I think that a boss doesn't work as well as a leader. So, but yet parents somehow fall into being bosses. Why do we do that? Why do we set up these boxes and become bosses? And then further, we continue that and set up boxes, rules to keep everyone safe, like children. So that's the intention of the rules, supposedly, to keep masses within parameters, safe parameters, or parameters that work for the society within a structure. And that is what that box is, something that if something happens and the rule doesn't fit it, then, you know, maybe one shouldn't follow the rule. Now I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but that's the way I think. That if there's a rule, you know, and you're not going to fit in the overarching reason for the rule, then why would you follow the rule? These are the reasons for the rules. This is a very boss-like attitude as opposed to leading. what is the reason for leading from a rule, from a box, from a box put in place with a boss-like attitude, as opposed to having given up like leadership that we can do? What are the reasons for that? And what are the reasons for going to a more leadership based way of leading without those parameters, with actually pulling people in the directions that we want them to go? Anyone?
As human beings, we've been taught that we're herd animals. And I'm a horse person. I watch animals all the time. And when animals are herd animals, they have certain needs. And yes, as human beings, we do have a need for that connection with others. But at the same time, we're not really herd animals in that traditional sense, because we're each individual with our own autonomy and guidance system. And each one of us has our own role, and we're all totally different. But when you've got the masses, it's easier to control, like in the school situation, when everybody's doing the same thing and everybody's following the same rules. And early on in life, I was taught, when studying archaeology and sociology, that in order for a people to become considered civilized, they had to have a formal religion, because without that, there could not be rules or laws to guide everybody to keep them in the same direction, going in that same direction. And so right now we're at a part of the world where there's this total global upheaval. And what I find wonderful about being an out-of-the-box thinker is that they leave you alone because they don't want to hear your ideas. But when there truly is a problem, who do they call on? Who do they bring in? I'm sure, Anshar, everybody on this group has been brought in because there's a problem that normal thinking won't solve. And so where we are in the world right now, it's calling for that out of the box.
Interestingly enough, the
concept.
idea of normal thinking or normal cognition or even neurotypical cognition doesn't really exist. You know, the formative patterns that create axonic and dendritic connections in the brain, that type of neuroplasticity as from the sensory experience of learning, that's not unilateral for anyone. You could take every single person in this room and give them a multiplication problem with two-digit numbers, and all of them would probably get the right answer. But if they had to explain all of their steps and where their mind went in order to be able to do that, that experience would be different for everyone. I think the perception of that sameness of thought comes from maybe the social desire to fit in. And I heard the term herd animal thrown in there. But I think the thing that's more succinct and distinct about the evolutionary process of human consciousness is that we're more pack or troop animals, like primates. And what that means is that rather than just going together with the largest group possible for safety, that we form much more intense social groups and social connections with the people that are in our closest proximity. But one of the interesting things about that is that the more socially distant we are to other social groups, even inside of our own species, the less empathy, care, understanding, all of the things that go along with it, because those social skills are based on proximity. And so because we're built on that system, we live in a world where hundreds of thousands of people can die to Boko Haram, and at the same time, have a couple of planes crash into a building and have 6,000 people die. And the entire focus of a culture will be on one thing instead of the other, because we care about that which is closer to our social group. And the idea that each one of the distinct minds in that group doesn't actually have as much in common as they think it does, and that most of those patterns, where the learned behavioral patterns can be up to 75% genetic. There's so many variegated differences in the brain, though, even in something as simple as like an addition problem, that the experience of that is different for every individual. Every individual has a different number of cones and rods in their eyes and neurons in the occipital when they look at a flower. Even if we all look at a red flower, none of us sees the same exact shade of red. So it's interesting that there's so much emphasis placed on uniformity of thought. I think that the idea that that even exists shows a fundamental lack of understanding about the organic process of human thought.
I don't know about that because the uniqueness of each and every one of us also leads to an end result, which is majoritarily we all look similar, we all have similar growth patterns, we all have social norms that fit within our particular group or community, or even as a world, that we face things as a unified system in many respects. And in nature, there are many unified sections that fit together into a bigger ecosystem. So, whilst I do agree that everybody is unique, there is no actual system currently to verify whether we are distinctly unique and have very different opinions across everything, or whether we have a unique outlook onto everything, but a unified conclusion to what we all have in common as a common result, I guess.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that we have this perception of perception anyway. I mean, that the process of evolving a consciousness to be able to make disparate decisions from your social group, evolutionary decisions, huge evolutionary adaptation. And yet that perception of individual narrative may not actually be truth. You know, if we look at what we understand about the universe, about matter, about energy, you know, there are no distinct objects. There are no solid objects. We're just a cloud of varying densities and vibrations of all kinds of particles. And even our perception of three-dimensional objects and solidity is not even really true. So this concept that we're individuals, I mean, we're more like a bunch of wrinkles, little poked up spots on the same blanket that happen to have evolved singular consciousness and are looking at the other spots that are poking up on the blanket and seeing that as if they were individuals. But is that the truth? And I don't know that that's the truth. So it's just the fundamental, it's putting Descartes in front of the horse, talking about the nature of consciousness itself, even just agreeing at the initial state before we can start to talk about the uniqueness of that system. It's a really fascinating topic in my view.
Matt, you've mentioned the word truth many times. I used to be a real news junkie, but when Kellyanne Conway started talking about alternative facts, I knew that we had reached a low point, and I don't watch the news anymore. And I try and fill my time now with music as opposed to news. And I've got a question for Alison. Alison, have you ever seen what's the most watched TED Talk ever, where Sir Ken Robinson talks about why schools kill creativity? You should watch it. It's a masterclass in how to give a great speech, and it's very funny and very relevant, because all the school systems globally have been built in a wrong way. Children really should be allowed to do what they're good at and express themselves freely. But in his talk, he talks about the fact the school systems globally are all, you've got science and mathematics at the top and arts at the very bottom. It shouldn't be like that. So please watch that. Why Schools Kill Creativity, Sir Ken Robinson. Has anyone else here seen it? No one?
No,
I haven't seen that
totally
particular
go
one.
with it.
I haven't seen it, but I resonate with that strongly.
Yeah.
Actually, the Montessori system is pretty good at following the child and seeing what the child is interested in, and then giving them more of that so that they can learn the thing they want to learn. Because the thing with kids is they don't like being taught, but they do like to learn. So
Yes.
if you sit a kid down and you say, you got to learn this and listen to this, and you get them to regurgitate it back at you, you've taught them how to regurgitate your information. I'm not even going to call it facts, but they haven't, creativity doesn't live there. You can't do anything with creativity in that space. But when you've got a child in a Montessori school, and I learned to teach Montessori. I have a very varied career, but my own kids were in Montessori, so I figured I should do what they're doing, and they did. And it's got so much more potential than the regular school systems. And I've lived in 8 countries, so I can talk about school systems in different countries, and they're all pretty much marching in the same direction, which is, you know, sit down, squash, and learn these things I'm telling you because reasons. And they're not necessarily useful. I mean, when did a school last teach a kid to balance a checkbook, or, you know, do their taxes? Or Montessori actually has a good system where whatever the child's interested in at the time will come forward. That's, if you've got a neurodivergent kid, though, that doesn't like a particular thing because it's hard. I'm thinking of my eldest son and math. He was clever enough to be able to manipulate and talk his way out of that for quite a while. And we had a hard time getting him to catch up. Can't blame him. I can't do math either. But
But yeah, Montessori makes
Good.
those things so available in so many different ways that whatever it is that you like to do, you can go to them, and you can sense them in every way. You can feel them. The Montessori math is beautiful.
Yeah, he has dyscalculia though, so numbers transpose and they shift, and you know, it's
Understood. Yeah, my son has the dysgraphia, but didn't have to write any of those numbers, just got to play with them, you know, feel them. And he loves math now, loves, but had the time in between when it was about writing it, and it was a big problem for writing it.
But as a system for creativity, Montessori is pretty good. It does foster that. And
I was a tutor in mathematics at the collegiate level, and it's interesting to me that so little emphasis is placed on critical thinking and reasoning in our schools. You know, I was looking at the course curriculum for a younger child, and they were talking about Helen Keller and Anne Sullivan, the whole miracle worker story. And it struck me that the emphasis is on teaching just this tiny little sliver of a human being. You know, that people are these statuesque, you know, pinnacles in history. And then they don't talk about the human element and how they got there and how that tied into their lives. Like Helen Keller, for example, she marched with the Socialist Party. You know, we don't learn that when we hear about her learning the word for water. You know, it's interesting that the moment that we start to teach something, if we don't give someone a genuine opportunity to explore knowledge and epistemologically separate for themselves the relevance of that knowledge, then what we're really teaching is a point of view. And I'm of the opinion that if a professor teaches a subject and by the end of it, you know their point of view, then they've failed you as a teacher.
It's interesting when we talk about thinking outside of the box and school. You know, some of my most successful projects were the ones that I was told to do it this way, and I went completely out of the box and did it a completely different way. A specific example comes from in one of my physics classes. We had to make a solar powered car, and I ended up doing it through one of my AutoCAD classes where I designed it in a 3D printer. I printed this car out. I spent like over $100 building the car, hundreds of hours designing the car, and I printed it, and I didn't make the body wide enough, or I made it too wide. I made it the same length as the axles. And so I couldn't run the car during the period that was assigned to run it. But I went back and I cut it so that it could run, right? And I showed it to my teacher, and she was like, this is amazing. I mean, it had like a pivot, and you could adjust it to the sun and all these different things. And she failed me on it because I didn't get it done during that period. I'm like, you mean to tell me like the effort that I put into this, the like science behind all of it and everything, you're gonna give me an F because I didn't get it done during that time? I convinced her to not give me an F on that because it worked and it did really well, but it's just so ironic that that we get put in these boxes, kind of going to what Lydia was talking about, boss versus leader. To me, boss is somebody who has goals and set boundaries of what you need to accomplish during a set period of time. And that's exactly what this was. She expected my car to run at that exact time or I would fail the class, right? But to me, as a student in a physics class, I showed like true leadership on how that assignment should really have been done, is leveraging all these different resources to create something that was amazing, but not be stuck to the rules of, oh, it needs to be done by this exact time. They say done is better than perfect. And in this case, it was just like 10 millimeters short of done because it wouldn't run. But I just found it so interesting that you could fail at something that was totally creative and outside of the box thinking that, had I been given that little amount of grace to run it and not have to fight with my teacher who was just thinking inside the box that this is how it has to be or you're going to get an F, it's just kind of crazy to me, And so school to me was a very challenging thing because I was constantly doing things differently, but I was always getting failing grades because it wasn't done within the box.
I always like to think of schools, sadly, as factories with bosses, factories with a conveyor belt, which is placed upon it some boxes. And some of us are escaping from those boxes, more and more of us, and some of us are not. And the result of a school is to pump out as many of these cookie cutter boxes that are perfectly shaped and fit within the timescales, Daniel. And if we don't, then we get rejected and put into the rejected pile. And in history, that's very obvious from people who we now consider to be a different intellectual level, who would have been pushed off the conveyor belt in the olden days and maybe put into some medical facility never to be seen again because it's considered that they were beyond help, or burnt at a stake because they were considered to be witches because they were providing medical answers that were based on things that the governments or the control systems that were in place didn't agree with. Going back to that conveyor belt and the factory, that's because the demand, the people who pay the money, they control the supply as well. And in a marketplace where you control the demand and supply, it can be very difficult for us to see a result that's beneficial for everybody. And I think that's the important thing about living outside the box, is to think about the other people and how we can help them to benefit.
Being outside the box for a moment here, you mentioned witches, burning witches, and witches were burned because they were women. There were any number of spurious reasons given for it, but they had herbs and did healing. It could be a beautiful woman that had turned a guy down. There's, if you read the history on witches being burned, that they were not, generally speaking, witches. They were women, and it was literally a witch hunt of women. So I know that's outside the box, but that's what we're here for. So I thought I'd just drop that piece in there. But if you read about witches, yeah, that whole thing was just it was an excuse. It was just an excuse.
We did not make money. We did not make anything good on any of these non-producing members of society, the women, the factory children, those that were outside of the box. So yeah, that's what we're kind of pointing at here.
Women have puny pockets these days precisely because they don't want women, back in the day, didn't want women to have spells and stuff in their pockets. So that's why we have miserable pockets, and you have to buy men's jeans in order to get decent ones. Craziness.
all the clothes with no pockets. It's right. Women's clothes are pathetic.
That's why though. So we can't hide spells. Have you ever heard? Seriously.
What?
I can go on that topic.
I love that, Michaela. And for me, you just hit on the one thing that I bump into all the time, this idea of women's intuition. And the fact that because of our roles in life, we were able to use our intuition more so. But it's not confined to just women. All people have an intuition when we set our brains loose and we let it do its job that it was designed to do for us, to find the information that we could assimilate and use. And so that whole concept of women's intuition, but that's what a lot of women got burned for.
This isn't outside of the box. This is just normal. When we actually tap into this, then we can go to our fullest potential. We can find who we are, what we love, how we communicate, how we actually reciprocate, and how we can manifest our everything that we do. But we've learned to squelch it for so long.
You've just described human design. That's what human design does, is you go through and hear all the things. And the thing is, you can be skeptical as you like, because I sure was when I first came across it. I trod very gently into that particular black hole, and until I saw how accurate it was. But that's exactly what human design's for, is to show you where you've been squashed, because that happens to everybody. It's not an intentional thing, but that's just what we do for lack of knowing how to not do that, right? Kids are always sat on. You're too much this, too much that, don't do this, don't do that. You know, I bet everybody here at some point has been told that they talk too much, they're disruptive, or they're daydreaming and not paying attention. But everybody's got something on their school card that says, you weren't enough, you weren't doing it right. Everybody has that. And it's just, that's what we grow up with. And human design is all about figuring out where the gift is there, because that's usually where it lies, and how to get back in touch with your intuition, because everybody has that. It's the oldest thing we have, along with the lizard brain. It's like that's the thing that's there. It's just that we don't listen to it because it's scary. How do you listen to that inner knowing and you have no evidence for it? Eek. So until you get practice with it, it's a scary place to go. And some people are too afraid to try it. Others hide behind skepticism, and that's, it's a choice. It's fine. But yeah, intuition is definitely a gift that everybody has, just different degrees of awareness of it.
That's usually what makes us who we are. Things that we get in trouble for, or whatever it is that we do that puts us out of the box, right? That's what really makes us who we are. And I think so often, to me, like, normal is weird. I think it's so important that when we find ourselves going outside of the box, that we really tap into it and recognize that that's what makes us who we really are, right? And that's where we become unique and uniquely ourselves. And I think it's so important that we try to recognize those things that we do differently, or that other people do differently, that makes us exactly who we are.
A thing I learned from Brené Brown was very simple but profound, and that is the opposite of belonging is fitting in. So when we stop asking people to fit in with the norms and fit in with the majority, then we can look at belonging, which is far more important. So fitting in is, it's one of the things with the parenting stuff that I do and the behavior analysis that I do is, no, you don't need to fit in. That's not a thing. Let's look at how you can navigate the world for you, for your best outcome. And let's look at what that looks like. And I talk about belonging all the time because people are sort of schooled in this idea of everybody needs to fit in. I mean, I've worked with a lot of kids with autism, for example, and trying to do battle against the trend to have these kids fit in drives me nuts. Why do you want these kids to work harder than anybody else to fit in? They can take that and shove it. You know, these kids belong. Let's figure out what their role is and, you know, where's their superpower? Because there is one. There's always something that they're amazing at. And it's often kind of hidden, again, because of societal expectations. And I go diving for that thing. I want to see where the superpower is and let's bring that forward. So fitting in is the opposite of belonging. Or you can put it the other way around. I don't mind, but the concept is there.
You just made me think of a conversation I had with a client this week where, you know, we do all these personality inventories. They're all over the internet. They're all over everything. And everyone's doing all these personality inventories. And at some point I asked her, I said, what are you trying to gain from all these inventories? Why do you keep taking them? And what are you trying to gain? And her face went as red as the screen behind Daniel. And she realized she was looking for someone outside to tell her who she was. When in reality, when we learn to live from in here instead of from outside in, we can be that individual. We can work from our strengths. Just like everybody on this call does, we do it innately, naturally, intuitively, however you want to call it. But that's who we are as misfits. And it works for us because we've been able to step outside of that box that someone tried to place us in, and then continually stepped outside of that box. It's when you live in that box until you're an adult and someone tries to take your box away that you've made them face the two main emotions that we each experience, love and fear. Everything else is a derivation from that. And when you're working from love, you're outside of the box. You're yourself. You're doing what you want, and you're a part of civilized society in a positive way. And when you're working from fear, it's everything else.
There's a place where we are all really just exactly who we are. And it's when we, you know, basically kind of, you know, as you said, we're our misfit self, our, you know, when we just, according to society, is misbehave, when we do what it is that we love to do. And when we, or sometimes when we are just misbehaving because we are doing what it is we need to do in order to find ourselves. If it's a kid who's misbehaving, and why are they misbehaving? What's that thing? Are they really misbehaving, or are they just doing what they need to do? There's just there's all the best stuff is actually in us being rowdy or spacey or you know, whatever it is that we're too much of.
Interesting thing about behavior. All behavior is communication. So bad behavior, in air quotes, is actually communicating a problem. The issue for kids and for adults that didn't learn as kids is that they have a problem, they can't articulate it, so they behave it. And that's what you're looking at. The question is, can you interpret what you're looking at? And can you then find an alternative behavior that they can use to articulate that same thing while they're learning the words for it? Because the language often comes a lot later. You know, I have an emotions wheel with 72 descriptions of emotions on them. And most people get stuck at around 12, you know, but so we are given a limited repertoire as kids to explain what's going on internally. And when a child doesn't have the capacity to tell you what's happening because their life experience is this big and their vocabulary is about the same, you then have the behaviors. So whenever there's a behavior going on, the only question I have is, okay, what's the point? What are we getting to here? What are you showing me is the problem? And, you know, in the DSM diagnostic manual, you'll find a condition called oppositional defiant disorder. And I'm going to call bullspit on that one. There is research that shows ODD is actually a trauma response. It's the child behaving their trauma to you. They are showing you, I have this trigger, I have this stuff going on, and this is what I'm showing you. And it can be really big behaviors. I've worked with some kids with this, but using something like oppositional defiant disorder, just look at those words. This child is oppositional and defiant, and what they have is a disorder. Good God, we're putting this on the kid. No, they had trauma. They are dealing with a whole lot of dysfunction from this trauma, and you're blaming them with this diagnosis. So there is a lot of battle to be had, even with the languaging. Because if I produce you a troublesome teenager and I say, this kid's been setting fire to things and they've been doing all these things, they have oppositional defiant disorder, most people's brains are going to go to, oh boy, they need corrective services, they need to be locked up, or they need, some kind of, let's get them away from here because they're dangerous. Whereas actually, let's look at the trauma that they are showing you, because holy smokes, that is a lot going on. Can we help this kid become a functional adult? And the other thing that's bizarre about the diagnosis of oppositional defiant disorder is it goes away when they hit, I think it's 18, and it becomes borderline personality disorder. So you have a diagnosis that changes with your birthday. Seriously? I've been in the medical field long enough to call bullshit on that too.
Yeah, and those are boxes that don't exist if we actually bring that child up in a village of intuitive people that actually can understand that language, instead of having it in a box where that child is acting out and it's just having to push against something and push against the box, and then there's the diagnosis. When we have the village kind of scenario where kids are brought up and there are many people around, so you've got a number of intuitive people who are around for the kids, and the kids are not treated with don't do this, don't do that, and a fear like kind of response, but everybody is looking out for everybody, and everybody is more of a intuitive nature, and I see that this kid is having an issue. Somebody's going to recognize what is going on. We all have different strengths and levels of intuition, but when you can have somebody besides the teacher and the parent in touch with the student, the kiddo, we actually have a better relationship with ourselves and with the kid. It's something we don't have a lot of in our society at this point. But when you can actually grow up in a village and not have that box that the kid has to push against in order to get their needs heard, and they, like Michaela is saying, there's not the language, there's nothing but these behaviors. And we've all been there. We've all done it at some point in our lives, whether we remember it or not, or we've had to say something and we've said with our behavior. And we could be heard if people actually took the time to respond with their intuition and to just be with us. But we kind of stopped doing that when we put up all of our boxes to be safe. That's why to tear down the boxes.
I just want to mention for the people who are not from the US too, something I discovered when I moved here, and I genuinely didn't know this, so maybe I'm slow on this, but the DSM is, it's used worldwide as a diagnostic manual, but it's actually an insurance book. All the diagnoses in there are written for the insurance companies to know what they're going to pay for and what they're not. And I was so pissed when I discovered this that I lost it in the place where I was at the time, because other countries, I know from experience, take this as a serious diagnostic manual, and it isn't. It is there purely for insurance companies to decide what they will and won't pay for. And as such, I am outraged that this thing is exported as a medical manual for other countries to use because it doesn't fit. Culturally speaking, things shift. So that's also why you can have something as incongruent as a diagnosis that changes with your birthday. That's why. So the insurance companies can categorize you. It's purely for the box. So holy smokes. Just thought you'd like to know that because it took me a while to learn it.
If we were to make this into a joyful conversation of making this conversation a book and making it.
Throw something in here, and this might be what you're looking for is
Yeah.
when I was younger, studying psychology, we took a survey, and I was into testing and stuff, learning how it could be manipulated, of course, because I couldn't go straight forward, on functional fixedness. And it's something that I haven't heard in a long, long time, and they've kind of let loose of it. But what functional fixedness is it's a way your mind works, that if I need to get a screw put into a hole in the wall, I have to have a screwdriver. If I want to hammer a nail, I have to have a hammer to hammer that nail. Now, if you have to have the screwdriver and you have to have the hammer, you have a very high functional fixedness score, which in our society, when you get a high score, that's supposed to be good, right? Well, here's the kid that got, 98, 99 on everything until I took the functional fixedness scale, and I got pretty much a 0. Because I don't need a screwdriver. I don't need a hammer. I can do anything with duct tape, baling wire, and, something else. I can make it work. Zip ties. I can do anything. And I'm not bound by the box of functional fixedness of how things are to be done and what tools are to be used and how it comes together. And that is what they're teaching in our schools. And that is the way our civilizations are going, is here's the approved and the appropriate way to get something done, or the right tool. And that's that functional fixedness score that they've stopped measuring, because the goal is to get everyone to the highest of the functional fixedness, whether it be through marketing, whether it be through education, whether it be through what we're told. When I would dare say everyone that's been on this call probably is there like me with a big old goose egg, and blessed for it. Blessed to be able to think outside the box. Blessed to be able to use a rock to hammer in a nail if I need to. And blessed to be able to live life just a little bit differently and be okay with that.
So to wrap this up, I want to go around one more time and say, what's the silver lining to thinking outside the box, being outside the envelope? What's the main takeaway on what's the benefit of being that person that's just going to be that much out there? Matt, you're looking ready to go.
Always ready to go, me. The real benefit of dwelling outside the box or inside the box is being able to appreciate the beauty and the love and the unity and the uniqueness and the ability of everybody. And that's demonstrated amongst the people here, but not just the people here, but everybody that we come into contact with on a day-to-day basis, is that you can look and you can see beauty no matter what it is, whether it's the fact that somebody looks at a insurance book and realizes that the diagnostic that's made about certain children is potentially pushing them off the conveyor belt that they're on in their box, or whether it's a different lady who looks at a stone and thinks how that can smash a piece of metal into a bit of wood. Much beauty, much understanding, much uniqueness, and yet we're all trying to live, trying to not just survive, but trying to thrive. That for me is the benefit.
For me, the benefit is being part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. When everything is flowing this way, we're able to go this way. And hopefully those that are paying attention might see we're going a better direction. And so for me, that's the biggest benefit to being outside of the box.
I just say people are the solution, not the problem.
That's a discussion on its own. I'm there for that. I'm there for that. Being outside the box means you get to shake things up, which is good because stagnation is not suitable for life. And I'm here for people who need what I know and what I have and what I can bring. And if I'm not there, then they're stuck. So I view that, you know, the more people know I'm around, the more people I can help.
It allows that where I show up, others show up who are amazing, just incredible, and experts in things that I could not even dream of. So it opens the possibilities that are endless. That's what thinking outside of the box, tearing down the walls is all about. Whether whether you naturally do it or it just kind of is that way for you, and you can't help it. It's worth doing. Just show up. So thank you so much for being on this call.
Thank you. See you another time.
Been a great conversation.
Thank you,
Bye.
Lydia.
Well, there you have it. That was our first roundtable discussion of an open concept, that of thinking outside of the box. And I hope you'll join us next week. We're going to be talking about the flames of grief, a much more succinct topic that will take on a whole new, a whole different demeanor. So that said, you know, these all weave into one another, and you'll find some of the same people in that discussion, and also a lot of new faces, but everybody has been a former participant on this channel. So it's really an exciting project to have everybody come in and talk to one another. As always, if you like this, please hit like, and if you would like to come back for more and help grow this channel ever so gently, push the subscribe button. Really appreciate having your participation here in the Joyful Path community. And we will see you next week. Ciao.